bricks on the screen, healthcare in between. Physics, art, and math got us down this path. Historical tales come alive, where science and stories dive. Blended facts with heart, knowledge from the start. Need bridge blues we sing to the future memory. Health and science in the mix. Midbridge got the fix. Complex subjects made clear. Every episode cheer. Ramona leads the way, explaining day by day. In the world of digital streams, turning knowledge into dreams. Through the tales of old, new stories unfold.
MedBits Webcast is a new kind of healthcare media channel to break the silo mentality and foster interdisciplinary thinking. Our mission is to fill that gap and to create a curiosity through different lenses, tapping the passion that guided the historical figures in medicine and bringing present-day groundbreaking research to the front lines. We interview physicians and leaders in the industry about present-day healthcare challenges on our live programming. Hey, welcome to the MedBits Webcast. This is Ramana Namraju. I'm the host. We have a very interesting program today. Always interesting programs I put together. Whether you believe we love me or not, there's a profound changes in the country right now. That is a part of the democracy, right? We have to accept that democracy is at the action. So my job is, my healthcare channel is to give all diversity of thinking. It is not a political, it is basically all ideas to put in and come up with the good ideas to solve within the legal framework. That's the best way to do it. So that is my goal. And then that's why I invited several different kind of guests and then different kind of perspectives. This one of the guest is coming up. He's from Miami, Renzo Del Castillo. Maybe I'm messing up the name, but I'm going to let him correct it. But this gentleman is a very impressive storyteller. He's an executive in healthcare for a long time, and then he's an excellent storyteller. And then I was impressed, and he's a poet. For me as a scientist, as a science guy, poetry was far from my thinking. But one day, when I left my children in the first time when I dropped my son in the Vanderbilt University for his graduation, I felt empty nested. At the time I read a poem called Khalil Gibran poem. It's called Children. So children came from you, but not you. They are not you. You are yesterday, they are tomorrow. So I learned a beautiful 2 sentences. It had a profound impact on me, how to look at the life. That's where the life is. So I think poetry has a powerful, one of the scientists was telling, even healthcare IT executive was telling here in Silicon Valley, the best trait you can give to his children is a storytelling is going to be the future of the game. If you can tell a good story, that is going to be the most powerful thing it's going to be. So Renzo Del Castillo is from Miami. He's a healthcare executive. He worked in a lot of companies, and he has a lot of experience both. And then he became a poet, and then he became an excellent storyteller. I was impressed. A journey from Lima, Peru, to all the way to the United States and Miami. And let me bring him to the table. Let him talk about himself. Hello, Renzo. Welcome to the MedBits Webcast.
Hi, Ramana. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Give me some background of yours. I killed your name or not, at least.
Sure, sure. So as you mentioned, and you said my name perfectly, by the way. As you mentioned, I was born in Lima, Peru, and my parents immigrated here when I was 5 because there was a terrorist group in Peru called Shining Path, and my mom was the secretary to the Minister of Health in Peru, and she stopped. There was a union meeting where some members of the group came armed, and she called the police, and she was marked for death. There were a number of attempts, 3 attempts on her life, and I think on our lives as well, until she said, "Forget this," and she immigrated to the States. My dad, who was a major in the Army, followed a couple of days after, and we began our lives here in the U.S. because her big brother, my godfather, luckily, I was able to be sponsored with a student visa, and it facilitated my ability to be here legally, which was it was a great thing, you know.
So, yeah, tell us a little bit of the journey that is after that, what kind of education he had, and how did he end up with the healthcare career?
Sure. So we, as I mentioned, we were immigrants. So in Peru, we were, I guess, either lower upper class or upper middle class. And that coming here, we really, even though we were supported in terms of the legal aspects of immigration by my godfather, we started with very little to nothing. I remember growing up with my sister being about 8 years old, 9 years old, and my parents would say, "Go ahead and have dinner. We already ate." But knowing they were lying, they didn't eat because there wasn't enough food for all of us, but not being old enough to understand why, and it marked me. But I did well in school, and I went to school for aerospace engineering, University of Florida, and a couple of credits short from my bachelor's graduating, I decided to change to poetry.
That's
Uh,
a big change. Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, you have children, right?
Yeah.
You're an immigrant as well.
Yeah.
Imagine your child tells that to their immigrant parents, like, "What? How are you going to eat?
What is
What's
it?
going to happen?" That was not a good Thanksgiving
Yeah.
slash Christmas vacation. But it came from love, right? They were just concerned about my safety. But I was an aerospace engineer. I loved it. I still love aspects of it. Uh, I'm fascinated by how things are put together and how they work. Phrenology, right? Like the study of systems. I'm just fascinated by it. But poetry, which has always been a big part of my life because my grandmother was a teacher, my grandfather was a very educated man on both my parents' side, and they gave me a lot of books. I learned how to read really early on, so I was reading complex poetry pretty early on. So it was always a big part for me, big part of who I am. And poetry just made me appreciate things for existing instead of just always trying to figure out how they're put together. And I got into a summer program for Cambridge. But I'm 41 years old, which means around this time, it was after September 11th. The people who came and blew up the towers came in with a student visa. I still didn't have my citizenship. It took about 18 years to get um, asylum, political asylum. I got political asylum actually right before I graduated from high school.
Hmm.
So I was about to lose all of my scholarships that I had earned, right? But I luckily got that. And it was after September 11th. It was 2000, around 2005, 2006. So it was a very heightened. If people, your viewers who are listening or watching this, if they were in the United States at that time, it was a very heightened time. It was up to the discretion of the immigration official at the gate to let you back in if you left, depending on your legal status. And I knew 2 people who were deported who weren't terrorists. So my parents had a conversation with me. It's like, "Hey, how about you finish here?"
Mhm.
Because I wanted to the summer program at Cambridge University in the UK was a way to get my foot in the door for grad school, which was my dream. I wanted to be a long-haired hippie poet writing barefoot on the grass and all that stuff, right? And I had to reevaluate what I wanted to do with my life. I switched my major to communications. I got into UF as well, the School of Journalism Communications. I think back in those days, it was like number 2 or 3 in the United States. But I loved the technical aspects of mass communications, which are aligned with engineering for me, but I also communication has that connectivity points
Yeah.
from poetry that I enjoyed. So I went to grad school for that, and then I graduated in 2009 with a degree, a master's in mass comm, specializing in international communication during the housing bubble.
Hmm.
So I did not get a job in my industry. I freelanced for a while. I live in Miami, Florida. Miami, Florida, as you and I were having a chat before, is an expensive city. I think right now, if you don't make 75,000 a year, you're poor. And I, you might not like this based on our conversation, but I consider there's two industries that benefit from inefficiency: healthcare
Yeah.
and law.
Yeah.
The worse you are at it, the more money they throw at it. And
Absolutely.
because I grew up as an immigrant, I had this concern for safety. I mentioned how my parents, there wasn't enough food. What I didn't mention is sometimes the lights would turn off. Sometimes we would have to beg friends and people that we knew to lend us money to be able to make payments on the mortgage. It was a difficult time. So I needed money. So that's how I got into healthcare. I joined a call center for a healthcare company in Miami. And within a week, I was doing projects and started developing from there until I became a consultant, then eventually a people leader, and then climbed up to exec for a couple of years. Yeah. That's how I got into healthcare.
Yeah. What kind of things you're doing? What kind of things you're doing in healthcare area in general?
Sure. So I I started doing care coordination for the Medi population. For the Medicare, the dual eligibles, the Medicare,
Mm.
Medicaid population.
Yeah.
Also worked in care transitions in order to reduce the hospital, like return hospital stays after an encounter in a hospital. We provided them with coordination of their care, having people come to their house, transportation, medication reconciliation, that sort of thing, in order to prevent a return encounter at the hospital. Also was involved in many different projects, from starting a food company service for the elderly in Miami here, trying to develop a provider network in upstate New York, which is something I would never want to repeat. That was incredibly difficult because it's its own anthropological study. And then I eventually became a consultant working for a variety of different clients in the Medicaid space, state Medicaid clients, commercial clients, federal clients as well. And then I joined. There was a project that happened from my healthcare consulting firm was acquired by a bigger company, and there was an implementation for a state Medicaid client that the owner of the company that was acquired talked to the CEO and promised the state they can do in 2 months when those implementations take 6 to 9 months. And yeah, nobody wanted to do it, but I was hungry. I was about 29, 30 years old, and I was one of the youngest consultants at the time in the consulting firm. And I said, I'll try it. I can put an agenda to it. I can see what can be done. And I had the benefit that the CEO of the company said this is a priority. So we got it done. Was there a 6-month bug and defect period afterwards? Yes. So that kind of put it in line with that. But it was considered a success. And then I was offered a position as the senior manager to the PMO, because the enterprise PMO didn't align with the pharmacy benefit management niche business. It's a bit different. So I was offered a position there and kind of grew from there, working with pharmacy benefit management in, again, the federal, commercial, and Medicaid space. And then it just expanded into product management, proposal management. I was just given a variety of different things because one of the specialties I developed with the help of a very talented team is putting together policies and procedures and building best practices from the beginning so that we have a stable foundation to be able to develop creativity and innovation in our projects and develop it. And then eventually that company was acquired by an even bigger company. and I moved on to a VP position for a bit.
So that is right now you're independent consultant. After that, what you became a VP, and then what you did after that?
Well, what I'm doing now is, well, as you mentioned, I wrote a poetry book, which became an Amazon #1 bestseller in a couple of categories. It just received a couple of awards at the International Latino Book Awards, which is one of the 5 biggest book awards in the US right now, which was very humbling. And I'm focusing on that while I'm also deciding what else I want to do, because well, we're going to talk about it, right? I'm
Yeah.
rediscovering my passion. I'm trying to rediscover my passion for the healthcare system.
Renzo, you spend a wide spectrum of jobs in the healthcare system. So you know that very strange is American healthcare system is a paradox. It is nobody is happy. Rich people are not happy. Poor people are not happy. There is no one. You see, you ask them that, are you happy with your healthcare system? Nobody. What went wrong in the healthcare system? You think with all your experience.
Well, that's a tough question to answer, right? But I will answer it for you. I don't know what went wrong, but I can tell you that for years I thought it was a failed system. It's like trying to the ship is sinking and you have a thimble and you're trying to get the water out with a thimble, because everything you do, you just put it in, and then it can just be a great, I don't want to say waste, but a great expenditure. A lot of resources are put into it, right? And when there's a problem, instead of trying to figure out root cause, we spend a lot of time treating symptoms, right?
Yeah.
That science of root causes, I haven't seen a lot of companies really try to figure out, because it's very reactive, because it's growing, it's expanding so fast that new. I remember we were like just getting aligned with some project, and then, oh, AI is the new thing. We got to do AI, artificial intelligence. We have to go over here, but you haven't stabilized what you needed to do, and you're reaching for something new and reaching for something new, because it
Mm.
opens up the market space, right? So, for example, the Medicaid space for healthcare is very limited. There's 50 states, a couple territories. There's limited times at bats. Those contracts can go from 3 to 7 years. Commercial could be much more lucrative, right? But I think there are a lot of good people that I've met that are trying to do right by it. And I think that if there will be a solution to the issues that we're facing in healthcare right now, it happens together with a bunch of different minds coming together to solve complex issues,
Yeah.
providing a variety of different viewpoints and experience. Um, and it also happens with empathy. You have to listen to the population you're serving to understand what the true problem is. I
Yeah.
remember very early on in my career, when I first became a project manager, a healthcare company I was working for was trying to also work with the dual eligible population in Los Angeles, and raise utilization of services so that they can prevent hospital encounters. And they encountered the homeless population of LA back in 2012, right? 2012. So think about this. This is 12
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
Very different landscape than what it is now. Mental health has a much bigger footprint and is more respected, along with nutrition, than it was 10 years ago,
Okay.
12
Absolutely.
years ago, right? What they didn't realize is that in order to get the homeless population to utilize their benefits, you had to talk to their leaders. It's almost like an anthropological study. You had to figure out how their dynamics worked, respect it, treat them with respect, and bring them in. They failed to do that, and that project was not a success, right? So that's just one example of many I've encountered. The projects and the implementations that I've seen be successful, not just mine, but for partners, clients, the initiatives that move forward, the ones that tend to be more successful are the ones that listen and understand the problem, and then make sure that their solution can solve the problem, instead of trying to make the problem fit their solution. Does that resonate with you?
You touched a very important point, and the one is that two things particularly resonate with me is mental health and nutrition. That is a completely leftover. That area was not. Now it is coming to the front lines a little bit, but still, that is a really has to play a role in healthcare. Do you agree?
Yes. I mean, if you think about it, so in Miami, when I returned from university, to Miami and I started living here, I had a group of friends that we went and helped. A friend of ours had a catering service, so we cooked meals and tried to help feed the homeless population that's also pretty big here in Miami. And there's other great organizations like Camilla's House that do it, but we were doing it outside that area, trying to expand the reach.
Yeah.
And one of the things, after a while, they didn't trust us, and after a while, they did, and then they were pretty open with some of the issues that we were having, and a lot of it was mental health. But again, this was back in 2010 to 2014, and it wasn't the way mental health is treated now. And again, I will say with respect, as an actual thing that needs to be addressed
Yeah.
and solved and nurtured and funded. It wasn't that. And there were a lot of veterans that came back from the war at that time
Yeah.
that were homeless. There were also people that were heartbroken,
Mm.
and they just, something snapped and they couldn't function, and they were unable to move past their depression to be able to keep their payments on their in their apartments or homes or whatever you want to call it. A lot of disenfranchised, and it was a lot of young people, because we saw it also. Remember, this is 4 years, so we saw like a group
Mm.
almost exponentially expand. There's a serious homeless issue in Miami right
Mm.
now.
Mm.
So I think I was in oh god, Prague about a year and a half ago, like that. Like, it's significant number of people now on the streets that you see. And mental health is a huge component of that.
Yeah.
The lack of treatment for it, the lack of empathy for it, thinking that if you, I mean, it wasn't that. I grew up in a Hispanic household, right? We don't need therapy. People who are crazy need
Yeah.
therapy, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like, well, let's talk about what's going on. Maybe I just need somebody to hear me out and help me process these emotions that I'm having, right? It's a serious issue, and I'm glad that
Oh,
it's getting more recognition now.
I suffer through ADHD. My ex-wife is always telling me that I have ADHD. So, you know, so I think that is the one thing that we need to manage them, and we need to have resources to manage it. I'm lucky to have a lot of doctors around me, friends of mine, and I understand where I'm going wrong, right? But I think a lot of people need that assistance, that empathy. We need that empathy to for them. Why that such a small people go through the veterans, for example. They serve the country and they go through humongous stresses on the life, and they see PTSD and all those things they go through. Actually, I'm going to talk about that PTSD. Yes, that is actually, I'm going to present a topic on that in a minute. But as actually, we have a humongous crisis of mental health in this country. In this war, not only in this country. This country is probably number one in that mental health problems. Around the world is growing because of technology, because of other pressures. There's a lot of injustices, that what you mentioned. All of them are combined and giving a lot of pressure to people, and then the amount of technology is dumping on them, also creating a lot of pressures. What do you think of the technology's role in this? There is a good, because of technology we are talking together, but there is also other side of the technology is a lot of pressures. Tell us a little bit about your view on that.
Sure. So I think technology in itself isn't an issue because it's a tool, right? Like, I have a knife. I can use it to hurt someone, or I can use it to cut bread. It's a
Yeah.
tool. It's the intent behind it.
Yeah.
I think the issue with technology is our dependence on it.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example that happened with me. I realized that I was reading less, and I'm an avid reader, right? I love reading. I used to read multiple books a week. I used to read like 3 books at the same time and just going back and forth, and no issue whatsoever. And then I found myself watching movies instead of reading books. And then I would read the Wikipedia summary of the movie, turn on the movie, and then start doing something else, or scrolling on Instagram, or chatting with people. And then I realized, wait, what am I doing? And
Yeah.
then I sat down to try to read, and I couldn't focus for more than 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, no, this is a problem. So I lowered the amount of time. I didn't get rid of it because, like you said, it's a useful tool, and I use it for things that I do in terms of the promotion of the book, for example. And we'll talk a little bit more about the book in a bit. But I set discipline of, okay, I'm going to read 5 minutes a day every day. And then once I was able to do that without a problem in a couple of days, I'm like, I'm going to read 10 minutes. I'm going to read 15 minutes. And then I started reading again. So it really does come from, for me, what worked was a self-awareness that I was becoming. It's like a muscle that was atrophying,
Mhm.
that I was becoming dependent on this technology. I
Yeah.
didn't need to check my phone every second. I didn't need to read a synopsis and then ruin the experience of experiencing something new in order to focus on something else than just having it on in the background. And I realized that I was able to regain my focus. So the reason I use that example is I think that we have agency with tools like technology. Technology is very useful. So for example, poetry, an ode, like a Neruda ode to a sock, that's, or the Iliad, Homer's the Iliad, something like that. It's not going to come through in an Instagram post.
Yeah.
But there are poets like Young Pueblo or Rupi Kaur who have shorter poems, but it's tied to that delivery system. Like technology provides a delivery system of information,
Yeah.
and that makes them successful, right? Whether they're great, whether they're not great. I'm not judging them. I think they're talented people and they've done all that. It's a different delivery system and a different way to promote an art form. So technology helps us adapt how we communicate, but we have to remember that it's a tool. For me, dependency on AI, right? I had a conversation with a recruiter a couple of years ago, maybe like 2 years ago. And they were saying, like, for people right now, the economy we're having some issues. People are applying for jobs. They're not doing great. And they were saying, like, oh, now you got to use AI to tailor your resume to the keywords found in the job posting. And you do this and you do that. I'm like, but
Everybody's going to use AI.
won't all the
What
resumes,
else he can make a distinguishing? This is so
yeah,
stupid.
won't all the resumes look the same? Because everybody that's applying has a general skill set that's geared towards that position, but now you're taking it and then you're just using keywords. So how are you actually reducing your work? I don't think it's an efficient way to use the tool. I think the tool is helpful
Yeah.
because it has AI, or a chat GPT can recall thousands of bits of information in a second, right?
Yeah.
If I want to do an anagrammatic poem, which is a poem where you take a word and you break it down, I can use AI and say, like, hey, how many words can I get out of the word bathrooms? Boop, 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 boop. Instead of sitting down and trying to figure it all out and then putting the creative work to write a poem. It could be a tool to help you, but if you just depend on it, you're going to lose something of yourself, and you're going to be less capable of moving forward with a skill set. You're going to lose areas of your brain, I think.
Music and art is a very powerful weapons of really dealing with sometimes mental health. Salvatore, you can see a lot of great artists and musicians and poets. I think they can influence the mental health and improve overall things. But there is another tool. I'm going to talk about it when I get back. When I come back, I will ask you about your poetry. Listen, I wanted to talk about your book, and then listen a couple of poems from you. So let me
Oh,
bring it back. This my thing, and let me present this another tool that I have for mental health. That is Renzo Di Castillo, Renzo Castillo. I think I said that right. So we're going to talk about a little bit about both of us together. We're going to talk about this. Let me give you this. Okay. So this is Renzo is there, and he's a really impressive. He's interesting. He was telling all these, the healthcare experience and then poetic experience. We need all of them together. That's why diversity in thinking. I'm going to talk about psychedelics. A lot of bad name for psychedelics, but there's a new frontier. There's a lot of research going on in the psychedelic world. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. It's educational purpose only. I'm not a doctor, so don't follow anything that this is a yeah. So in the middle of the pandemic, there is a Erin Birchweiler. She's from Seattle, Washington. She was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, metastatic cancer, and she has two small children, and she was very depressed, and she was consumed by dying thoughts and worried about her children, and and that is a big concern, and she's consumed by dying thoughts. So her doctor, Dr. Sunil Kumar Agarwal, another Indian doctor, he wanted to prescribe a psilocybin, a psychedelic drug. So what happened is, psychedelic drug is defined as a Schedule 1 drug. That means they have no currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States, so you cannot prescribe. You need to get special waivers and all kinds of. It's a huge problem. So Erin Boltzweiler. So actually, Trump, to give a credit to the Trump administration, he passed a law. It's called a Right to Try Act. Right to Try Act is, you can, the people at the end of the life, terminally ill people, patients, can try all kinds of methods to save their lives. You can use some of the unapproved drugs also. But the agencies, federal agency, regulatory agencies, they have their own concern, valid concerns, because they can be misused and misdiagnosed. So that is a problem that they face. So she filed a lawsuit in the federal lawsuit, the judicial court in Washington State. Him and Sunil Agarwal, she and Sunil Agarwal filed a federal lawsuit. There's things still going on, but states are liberalizing a little bit of those kind of things now. But mental health crisis, as Renzo was talking about, is going to be huge among us in Miami, in Los Angeles. This is a You see homeless populations. A lot of them are veterans. They're having a lot of mental health crisis. We need tools. We don't have enough tools to solve this problem in a massive scale. So there is a one tool, maybe potential benefit of psychedelics may do that. Psychedelics have these potential benefits. Is a depression and anxiety. It can solve PTSD. A lot of these veterans, post-traumatic syndrome. That's the addiction, drug addiction, stroke rehabilitation. It can help tremendously. These psychedelic drugs. Psychedelics, I tell you what are the psychedelics are. I think I misread probably. Yeah, psychedelics are basically, DMT, dimethyl, tryptamine, that's one, MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine. These are all same family. Ayahuasca in the Indians, Native Indians use in South America. These are all, particularly in Peru, they are very popular actually. So these are all psychedelics. Is the same family. They create a hallucination. They kind of are things they create. So it was during the Nixon administration. Actually, they did a lot of research there. After that, but the Nixon administration banned all of them because of potential abuse. So, but anyway, now they're finding out it can do a lot of good things, but there is also bad things. It can give a acute anxiety for some people, psychotic reactions, psychosis. This is a hallucinogen persisting perception, means it can create a sudden hallucinations. Like a ChatGPT is creating. Some of them are aliens. Some of them are, they think they're talking with the gods and higher dimensions. We don't know yet, but scientists are talking about that. In fact, so we are. These are all things. Some negative things, some positive things, but just one thing really surprises the scientist is just one dose of psilocybin, 200 milligrams of psilocybin, is treating the depression in some people. What is the scientific? That is a scientific puzzle. What is the mechanism unknown? What is really, your people take lifelong medications, they're not curing depression, and one dose of psilocybin can cure the depression. They want to know. It is a scientific puzzle, but it's doing it. It is working very well. So they wanted to really. A woman came to rescue. Her name is Gul Dolan. Gul Dolan she's a doctor. She's a PhD. She's from John Hopkins. I think a Turkish name. I think it is a Turkish name or Ukrainian. I don't know exactly, but one of those came from. But Gul Dolan, what she did was the M and Matthew Johnson, they started a lab on the psilocybin, all the psychedelic labs in John Hopkins, right in John Hopkins. So Gul Dolan says she's a more of a focus on biological. Matthew Johnson is head of the department. He was focusing on a psychological aspect of the the psychedelics. So what they did was, oh sorry, what happened? Oh, yesterday something I didn't. Oh yes, it's. Let me bring it back a little bit. It disappeared on me. Okay, okay. So, let me go through. So, what is this Gulgolan dish that she did some experiment with the octopus? Octopus, what they did is a very antisocial. Octopuses, except the mating time, they never like anybody else around them. So she gave a MDMA to the octopuses, and then they started meeting, and they're becoming friends with other ones. They're becoming closer. They're spending with the mate a little bit longer time. That was a very amazing discovery she did. The antisocial became a social person with the MDMA. Is an octopus in general is a very the animal that lives in the sea. It is not is antisocial. It doesn't like to other people except the mating time, just a few minutes, few seconds probably. So, but after taking the MDMA, administering serotonin, and then they found out the effect of the serotonin and oxytocin is creating some kind of a courtships. It's started loving other fellow octopuses. That is a very interesting observation she made. So, actually, what's surprising is the octopus has no frontal cortex, no central cortex, no amygdala, no cerebellum, absolutely no brain, but it is behaving like a human, self-awareness. It sleeps, is a dreams, and it is a trickery, like humans. We trick people. So all it is doing all those things as a human behavior without a central nervous system. That is an amazing for her. And she dwelled into the more into the direction. What she found out is an amazing discovery she found. That's I tell you what that discovery is. The let me explain a little bit before discovery. You need to understand the critical periods. Critical periods are, they found out, psychologists found out, a certain period of time, one to age 1 to 6, our brains work a certain brief period of time absorbing things. So for example, age 1, we understand the movements. Number two, senses come into the life. Three, language. This sort of short period of time, we learn all these things. My son used to play with the cans. I used to buy him expensive toy. He never used to play. He was playing with the cans and tops, and then I didn't understand it. Now I understand why they were exploring. The brain asked them to explore those things. That's why don't take when the kids are playing with something, you don't take it out. You're playing with a stupid toy and take it out. That is yours. That's why they act up and then it's a tantrum they call. But in fact, that is a brain requirement. Brain is demanding that actually. So that's a very so opens the critical periods that we learn a lot of things. All our learning process done during the critical periods. Very 1 to 6 maximum learning things we learn is between ages 1. So early childhood is extremely important. Renzo was talking about all the pressures and the lifestyle life pressures. 1 to 6 has to be protected. It's a very important early childhood days. So after that, you don't learn like before. Stops learning. We are improving the knowledge, but you're not learning. You're not open to learning. So what did Guldolan cracking the amazing code? He cracked that code. What she said was, if you use a psychedelics, you can go back and open the critical periods again, even when you're old. I as a older man, I can go back with the psychedelics. I never took it, but you can go back into the childhood days and open the critical periods to learn. When you That's where the effectiveness come, because your mind is very easy to learn, understand, absorb all those things. Gulgolan, what is saying is that critical periods are open with the psychedelics. That's an amazing thing she found out. Even she showed with the proven in the depression, for example, If you do the depression with the side, that is a trick of the one dose. What is one dose is doing? It is opening a critical period. But if you open this critical period is not enough, because some people went back to the depression because he don't have therapy. He got to learn during the time, very short period of time. If you open the mind, critical period is open the mind, and then immediately you start the therapy on it, then it solves a lot of problems. Depression is solved. That is what she found out. It's an amazing research. She's going to win the Nobel Prize, no question about it, in my view. So, so loneliness, for example, as you get older, you become lonely and you don't like people and you become a cranky, you know. So it's one of the things is psychedelics can do that, change that actually. So what octopus is doing by doing the psychedelics, they become friendly with other say octopuses, the older people. What you do is you administer the psychedelics, and then you create that social meetups groups, and the older groups, they can become socially active. They take them to critical period and opens to be social. It opens up a very strange way. It opens up. So so this Mozambique, there is another one is going on. A City of Hope, California is doing Mozambique. What they did was ayahuasca and a hormone that is there, and combined with the Mozambique, it is actually producing a 700% increase in the insulin producing beta cells. Is make you the diabetes. We have a lot of things going on. It is a wonderful research going on as TBI, PS, that traumatic brain injury cases, particularly soldiers who go through. There is a plant in Africa, the Stanford professor, Dr. Nolan Williams, was administered and she gave a very positive results. With the therapy, you got to have a therapy because it opens the critical period and you have to give the therapy right there during the time. Is an amazing. But a lot of people are combining with the hallucination. So there is now this $2 billion investment on the new drugs, on the psychedelics, non-hallucinogenic neuroplastogens, means there is no you can take it out, hallucinogenic part, and still you can administer. Tagaman is one of the Tagman, I think, is one of the medicines they are getting approved. Gilgamesh and Seaport, they are all funded now. Skip the trip. You don't need that's what they say. You don't need to have a hallucinogenic effect. Without that, you can achieve that. So mystery, spirituality, and space and time, introspection. You're lost in the space, you're lost in time. But what he's doing is playing the time cells. I talk about the next session, another session about the how that affect the brain in the space and time. How do you feel oneness? All those things. The psychedelics can create that brain and mind. And there is amazing research going on in New York University, University of Berkeley, San Francisco here, and then it is really opening up our new frontiers in the medicine, in the psychedelics, brain, mind, and spirituality. It is a new tool is coming up with the medical field, and it is going to be, it's not addictive. Without addiction, you can create a drugs that is really combining our complex mind with the new things. So we hope. Thank you for listening, and let me bring my friend Renzo back in this one. He can talk about a little bit about his tools that he's talking about. Yeah, let me. This is let me hide this one. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back, Renzo. So
Good
tell us
to be
what
back.
you think.
Thank you.
The new research is going on. Is an amazing. Is from South America. A lot of ayahuascas that people administer. It was a bad name, but it's a lot of good things. Humongous research going on in the psychedelics.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I think it's important to always, as you and I have talked about before, apply the scientific method and see what can be done to find solutions to the issues that we have.
So, as you say, mental health is going to be a big problem in our societies. So,
It
you
is.
you created one of the treatment kind of thing is a poetry. You do for the poetry very well. Tell me about your journey into the poetry, and
Sure.
just tell if you can read one poem in English, one poem in Spanish, would be
Sure,
great.
sure. I can definitely do that. So the reason I wrote the book was my dad passed away in 2020 from pancreatic cancer. And there was a period in my life where it was about 7 years where my dad died, my best friend's mom died, my grandmother died, my cousin, who was my age, we were born a week apart, we were very close, he died, my little cousin died, some friends died, family, like everybody was dying, my dog died. I had a relationship that I thought was going to end up in marriage. Around that time, it didn't work out, and I realized I was moving too fast to grieve. I needed to process all of these emotions, because that, if you don't process it, it comes out either as body acne, shortness of breath. You're going to have some physical reactions to this. Also, around that time, I was doing, and I still do, therapy. I have therapy every Monday, in order to process these things. And I realized that my family is with me. My father is with me in the way I smile. My grandfather's with me in the way I part my hair. Um, all the traditions that I have that make me, that make up me, are the people that I love. Think about the first time you tried a food that you like, or a song that you love, or a movie that you enjoyed, or a book that you get, somebody recommended it to you, somebody you admired, right? And if that's the case, then they still are alive in me. So the language that I had to process that is poetry. And I wanted to leave an exploration thematically. I wanted to tell the story of my family, not literally, because I do not want to get into those conversations with family members and asking for permission to use certain stories, right? But a thematic exploration of the immigrant aesthetic. I live in Miami, which is a port city. It is a center for Latin American and Caribbean migrations. It's a center. Everybody wants to vacation in Miami. I went to Paris. I'm like, oh, Paris. Everybody there like, oh, Miami, j'adore Miami, right? Like Miami is this. Anywhere I went, like Miami's a place we're going to vacation. And it has a lot of the issues that are facing us right now happen here in Miami. And there's poets and artists that have a voice, that want to have a commentary on this. And it's important to be able to express that, because art creates an analytical relationship between yourself and an object, which develops empathy. Just by definition, you're seeing it from a different perspective. You're more ready to accept another perspective than your own. So, saying all that, in order to process all that grief I was going through, I, wrote this book. And
What is
in
the
this,
name of the book?
oh, I think I have
Can you
it
show
right here.
me? Yeah.
Yes, yes, of course. The book is called Still.
What is it called?
Still.
Still. Very
And that
beautiful.
is my dad, my mom, my sister, and myself when we first
Oh,
arrived.
nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I picked this picture because
Beautiful.
I think that we all have totems or milestones or images that represent a threshold space, a moment of change. There was a before this picture, which was Peru, and there's an after this picture, which was the United States. This is the first picture we took as a family when we immigrated.
Yeah.
Must have been maybe like a month or 2 months into it.
Beautiful.
And there's a definite before and after. It was a moment of change, of transition. And I think we're always in a moment of transition. So for me, being able to process my emotions through art helped heal some of that grief that I had inside me. Because for those of your listeners, for yourself too, for those who have experienced grief in their life,
Yeah.
the best way I've had it described to me is that it's a hole that appears in the center of your life, and you fall and it hurts and it's dark and it's so hard to get out. And then all you can do is hope that you build enough life around it that you can pull yourself out. And then you can live and not fall in the hole for days, weeks, months, maybe even years. But then you trip, fall back in, and it hurts just as bad. And you hope you can pull yourself out again, because it's part of you now. It defines you now. It's a part of your makeup now. So
Can you read one verse from
yeah,
whatever the verse you have?
I mean, I can definitely do that. I can read. You said English and Spanish, so you know
One
what?
English, one Spanish. Quick poem.
I'll choose the same poem in English and Spanish.
Okay.
And since I was talking about my dad's death, it's a poem I wrote to process that.
It makes me emotional because I'm thinking about my father. I left him. That is a really profound influence on my and our family itself. He's a school teacher. He was giving us such a. It is very very. Every immigrant just thinks about that. Is a part of the very psychic of the process. That is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll give you, if you give me just maybe 2, 3 minutes, I want to give you some context as to why this poem is my
Absolutely.
reaction to it. So my dad was a wonderful man, a loving man. He was an army major, a fighter pilot, but also extremely Catholic, like super Catholic, and very goofy and loving. So he was all of these things. He can be very severe based on the way that he grew up and the discipline he had in the army, and then he could be very, very loving and caring. He was like Ted Lasso, if your people watch Ted Lasso, right? Goofy and making jokes and making you feel at ease. But when I was growing up, I would come home with like a 95, and he would be at his desk, sitting down, and he'd look at the paper. And while he was looking at the paper, he'd say, "Were you sick? Were you emotionally distraught?" I'm translating, right? "What could you have done differently, son, to get a 100? To get the 5 points you're missing?" Okay, I come home with 100. "Were you sick? Were you emotionally distraught? I see here that there are 2 extra credit questions you chose not to answer. Why?" I'm like,
Whoa.
"I knew I had 100. I didn't need them." He's like, "Son, God punishes pride. If you want 100, you have to study for 2." The end result of this was that I grew up thinking I was not good enough. Nothing I did was ever good enough, and that my worth was my value. And whenever we talked about it afterwards, he'd be like, "Yeah, but look how good you turned out,"
Yeah.
and walk away, which would infuriate me. It would infuriate. I'm like, "What?"
I don't want to repeat this, but I tell you exactly my son, I do the same thing. He complains about me, same thing about it.
Yeah, but it did, because I was like, no,
Anyway,
this is, it doesn't feel good. So eventually, about a month and a half, something like that, before my dad passed away, he had pancreatic cancer. They gave him 3 months, but he lasted for 2.5 years, 3 years, and 2.5 years without morphine. My dad was doing kettlebells and exercising. He just had a joie de vivre, right? Like when somebody gets a diagnosis like that, some people start dying. My dad started living more. Like he just had, and I think it was his faith. I'm not a religious person. He was. And I was doing yoga. I do a yoga practice because I was in a car accident, and yoga is the one thing that helped me heal my knees to be able to run marathons again. And I just have a lot of respect for yoga. But my dad, he went outside. I was outside doing it. This was during COVID, and I was in the backyard where I had all the gym stuff. I was living with my dad at that point. Now my mom, my sister, all moved in to help, and her family, to help take care of my dad. And he came out and he's like, "Son, I want to talk to you about yoga." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "I'm worried about your immortal soul. That's not a Catholic thing." And I'm like, "Okay." That day, however, I had patience. I'm like, "No, Dad, I find it like it helps heal me, about the accident, but I've also been focused on the future. Yoga, I have to be uncomfortable in the moment, or else I'm in Warrior 3 and I'm gonna fall on my face. Like, boom, if I'm not just focused on the here and now." Okay. We had a conversation that day, and it led to a really nice one. And then he said something. I don't know, Ramana, if you've ever heard something that you needed to hear and you didn't know you needed to hear it.
yeah.
But my dad told me, "I know I made you feel like you weren't good enough growing up, and I'm sorry." It's the first time he ever said he was sorry.
Mm.
I just needed that acknowledgement, like, "I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I'm your father, and I love you." He's always told me he loved me. That wasn't new, but he's like, "I'm your father, and I love you, and I know that if you don't give your all,
Yeah.
you won't be happy." Cleared it up. And then he said, "I just didn't have the language before to tell you this." Language, poetry, language. And when I wrote this poem, it's called Song for My Father.
Yeah.
The I took the Lord's Prayer from Catholicism and rearranged it because in that I was trying to find a common language to be able to express certain things to my father. I don't really like explaining poetry because I feel once I write it, it becomes yours. I don't want to influence your interpretation of it. But based on what we talked about mental health, I thought it was important to give you a little context. So I will read it in English and I'll read it in Spanish, the same poem. It's called Song for My Father.
Yeah.
How wrong I was, thinking I am alone when you live in my way of being, in the tears shed, and in every dream cut short at the moment of waking. When storms hold the sun hostage from my sky, it would serve me well to remember that you still exist in the threshold space between reality and imagination. Your advice, the prayer my heart repeats unknowingly in the darkness. My Father, who art, wherever thou art, hallowed be our name. Thy solace come. Thy will is not understood neither on earth nor heaven. I lack the appetite for our daily bread, and forgive me my doubts as I forgave your certainty. Lead me not into desperation, but deliver me from fear. For thine is the fiefdom, the knowledge, and the peace. Help me to accept the unacceptable. Amen.
Beautiful.
And I'll read the same poem, the Spanish version. Canción para mi padre. Qué equivocado estaba, pensando que estoy solo si tú vives en mi forma de ser, en las lágrimas derramadas y en cada sueño incompleto al despertar. Cuando la tempestad rapte al sol de mi cielo, me serviría bien recordar que todavía existes, cuidándome desde el umbral entre la realidad y la imaginación. Tus consejos, la oración que mi corazón repite en la oscuridad sin saberlo. Padre mío, estés donde estés, santificado sea nuestro nombre. Venga a nosotros consuelo. No entiendo tu voluntad ni en la tierra ni en el cielo. No tengo apetito para el pan de cada día. Perdóname mis dudas, así como yo perdoné tu certeza. No me dejes caer en desesperación, mas libérame de todo miedo. Ayúdame a aceptar lo inaceptable. Amén.
What a beautiful soul you are, Renzo. I tell you, you're eloquent speaker. People listen to you. You have a great soul. You can connect with anybody. I think I'm a privilege to have you on my show. It's total honor and privilege. And then thank you for coming on the show. And just if you stay for a few more minutes after this podcast, I will talk with you. But it is a truly an honor and privilege. You know, you are a beautiful soul. What is a book where they can buy? Can you tell?
Sure. So the book is called Still again. It's on Amazon. There's the hardcover, the paperback, because I think you should be able to travel with books. As a matter of fact, my friend who wrote there's an English and Spanish foreword, and I have two friends that are very dear to me who wrote it. He said Renzo should be read in the lobby of a hotel, right? You should take this, go travel, experience life. That's really
Yeah.
something that I'm a big proponent of. So the paperback's there. I did the audiobook myself. The audiobook is what won an award at the International Latino Book Awards for best silver medal for best poetry audiobook. And it was an honorable, and the book itself was an honorable mention for best poetry book of the year and best community and culture book of the year there. And I also have a Kindle, and the Kindle, the electronic, the ebook, I made 99 cents because I couldn't make it free. I'm a big proponent that art should be accessible, and if I could make it free, I would, but I can't. So if you want the book and you don't have much money, it's available for 99 cents. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok under Renzo Del Castillo, my name, .author. You can find me on LinkedIn under my name. If you want to see what companies I work for, you can find me on Facebook under that. There's www.renzodelcastillo.com. It's a website that's dedicated to the events that I do. I host a lot of book launches here in Miami. I'm a very big proponent and I hope ambassador to the Miami poetry community, where all the stand-ups that we do, all the open mics, because it's important to get out there and promote art. So that's where you can find me. But one thing I want to take a moment and just, Raman, I just want to thank you for being generous with your platform, being generous with your time. you also seem to be a very kind soul, and I'm very glad that I've met you. So thank you for sharing your platform with me. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you, Ranjo. Your experiences are all very similar that I go through, and with my children and my father. Thank you so
Mm.
much. You reminded us a beautiful story. You're a beautiful storyteller. It is executives. We are healthcare is of all facets of multifaceted people that work in, and then we need to know all of them and their experiences. You are one of the best examples. Thank you so much, all of you. Good night, all of you. Then good night, all of you.
We are retelling their stories through our patented designs that can be worn on scrubs, t-shirts, printed on conference bags, and endless other promotional materials. Daily Wear for Medicine is the first ever of its kind to create curiosity in medicine through visual art. We at MedBricks are celebrating unsung heroes of the past who made enormous contributions to the field of medicine through our unique campaign called Daily Wear for Medicine. You can wear it, carry it, and give it.